Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland, and here I am where Udham Singh shot dead Michael O'Dwyer on the 13th of March 1940. So this is Caxton Hall in London, building that dates to 1882, was used for many political meetings and society meetings. So Udham Singh was born on the 26th of December 1899 in the Punjab, India. And it's perhaps providential that he was born on the day that the British call Boxing Day, as he was to deliver such a blow to the United Kingdom. Anyway, so Udham Singh, he was from a Punjabi-speaking Sikh family. Well, virtually all Sikhs speak Punjabi. And when he was little, when he was a baby, his mother died, and his father died a few years later. So Udham Singh had one brother. I'm not sure about any other siblings. They were sent to the Central Khalsa orphanage at Amritsar. So they brought up there, and he went to school. And that's something that can't go without saying, because this is well over 100 years ago. A lot of children didn't get to go to school in those days. Anyway, he wanted to join the British Indian Army. He was briefly allowed in it. He was kicked out after a few months. They found him to be uppity and insubordinate, and that was really to be the story of the rest of his life. And I believe that even his name Udham Singh, Udham means something like that. Obviously, Singh, as in lion, the usual Sikh surname. But not all Sikhs not all Singhs are Sikhs. Anyway, he got involved in the Gadar movement, as in this Indian independence movement, not the Congress Party, and the Hindustan Socialist Republican Association as well. And in 1927, he was arrested. He was awarded 4 years incarceration for illegally purchasing firearms. Presumably, he wanted to use them for insurrectionary purposes. So the police were keeping a close eye on his activities. He was eventually set at liberty, and we're not sure where he was the day of the Amritsar massacre. His whereabouts cannot be ascertained with any certitude for that day. So I think everybody watching this video will know what happened. It was the 13th of April, 1919. It happened to be the day of a Sikh festival. I hope I pronounced it correctly, Vaisakhi, when about 20,000 people gathered at Jallianwala Bagh in Amritsar. That's a public garden. I've been there, and Brigadier General Reginald Edward Harry Dyer was the officer in charge of some Indian troops back there. He was a white Briton. He got his Gurkhas and his Baluchi soldiers there, and without warning he opened fire, and they fired for about 10 minutes, shooting dead hundreds of people, wounding several hundred more. Even though he said these people posed no threat to him, none of them had tried to attack him, none of them had any firearms. And despite one of his junior officers suggesting, giving him a last warning, he refused to do so. There was no proper egress from the square. Some people jumped down a well to avoid the hail of bullets. He ordered his men to concentrate their fire where the crowd was densest to maximize casualties. And these were all civilians. They were mostly young men. But anyway, there was absolutely no reason or justification for him opening fire and killing hundreds of people. There had been some disorder and arson in the town in the days leading up to this, and 5 people have been killed, but this was obviously a grossly excessive use of force. It was an atrocity. Although he was quite nervous about it afterwards, he was utterly unrepentant about it for the rest of his life. Now, Michael O'Dwyer was the governor of the Punjab at the time, who was in Lahore at the time. Now, I'm not sure whether O'Dwyer ordered this massacre or simply heard about it later and then offered his public apologia for it. That's his. Vindicated it, saying this is the correct thing to do, but certainly he was also utterly impenitent. Anyway, the story goes that Udham Singh went to Jallianwala Bagh and picked up a vial of the blood-soaked sand and swore by the sacred soil of his homeland that he would go to the ends of the earth, if necessary, to exact vengeance on whoever had perpetrated this massacre of his people. Anyway, people were very frightened after the massacre, and to make it even worse, Dyer imposed a curfew immediately, saying you have to stay in after dark. Some of the people who were there lying wounded could have been saved if they'd been given medical help with promptitude, but no medical aid could come to them, so they succumbed to their wounds when they otherwise would have been saved. So it's certainly at least 375, that's the official death toll. Many people estimate it's several times that figure was the true number of fatalities. Anyway, so Udham Singh, he was free from prison in 1931, as I said. He went abroad. The Indian police, i.e. pro-British, were trying to keep an eye on him, but he slipped through the net. He came here to the United Kingdom in 1934. He learnt English, though he never completely mastered it. He worked as an engineer. Anyway, so he had really bided his time. The propitious moment seemed to come to him on that evening of the 13th of March, 1940, when he read in the newspaper that there was a joint meeting of the Central Asian Society and the East India Association would be held here, would be addressed by Michael O'Dwyer. O'Dwyer had been knighted by the British Indian authorities for his services. So if I call him Sir Michael, that's not any expression of respect. I'm simply attesting the historic fact that he was knighted and it has not been posthumously degraded. So O'Dwyer was from County Tipperary, Ireland, and like most Irish people, about 70% of us, he was Catholic, and obviously the Catholic majority was particularly high in the south of Ireland, such as where Tipperary is. He came from a fairly well-off minor landowning family. He was a very bright boy, and unusually for a Catholic from the south, he was ardently in favour of a full union with Great Britain. He was very brainy. He won a scholarship to Balliol College, Oxford, where he did a course to prepare him for the Indian Civil Service. He went out to the Punjab, and he certainly worked diligently. He was zealous in his Christian faith. He was married, he had children. He had many of the white supremacist assumptions that were widespread in the white world at the time. He was petrified by the ghost of 1857, and he thought in a moment there could be a huge rebellion in India, and the way to prevent that was by stamping on the least sign of rebellion with uttermost force. So he never apologized, or he didn't rue the mass killings which had taken place in Amritsar on his watch. So he retired here. And after the massacre, there'd been an outcry. People had demanded that Dyer resign. He did indeed retire early, but obviously most people think he should have been executed. And some Britons said he shouldn't suffer even pecuniarily. Well, they had a whip round for him, and they donated £26,000 to Dyer for his retirement. So he was living in opulence. So let's not confuse Michael O'Dwyer, the governor of the Punjab, with Reginald Dyer, who was the army officer who ordered all those people to be killed. So Dyer then returned to the UK. He died in 1927 down, I think it's in Cornwall, the southwest tip of England. O'Dwyer was still alive in 1940. So O'Dwyer, the governor of the Punjab, was the one who was here to deliver a speech here. And indeed, he delivered his oration. So Udham Singh decided to track him and whack him, and he had illegally purchased a revolver from a soldier in an alehouse some days previously with a view to executing vengeance upon Michael O'Dwyer. So he sat in the audience and he waited patiently until the end. I suppose he calculated this would maximize his chance of shooting the man fatally. If he'd stood up and rushed towards him in the midst of the meeting, then he might have been tackled by some of the crowd. So he went up to him as people were going to ask questions informally at the end, and he drew his revolver, which he'd secreted in a book. He'd cut out some of the pages to provide space to hide his firearm, and he shot at O'Dwyer from point blank range, striking him twice in the torso. One of the bullets penetrated O'Dwyer's heart, and that was the end of him. He died instantaneously. He fired other bullets and wounded 3 other men, including the Marquis of Zetland, who was a British government minister, but none of the other 3 died. Now, this was clearly a no-return mission, more or less a suicide mission. So he wasn't killed at the spot. He was apprehended immediately, piled on by the crowd until officers of the law could arrest him. He was taken into custody. He instantly acknowledged what he'd done, and he was very proud of himself for, as he saw it, doing justice and avenging the people of India. So they asked him to give his name, and he gave it as Ram Muhammad Singh Azad, as in a name of a Muslim, a Hindu, and a Sikh, as well as Azad, meaning free. And when some Britons who had some knowledge of India realized what he was doing, they said, we can't possibly publish that name because that would be inspirational to other Indian revolutionaries. Anyway, he was put on trial. His trial began a few weeks later, and one of the barristers defending him was V.K. Krishnamenon, who was subsequently the first High Commissioner of Independent India here in the United Kingdom. And he was duly found guilty, and the judge then asked him whether he had anything to say in his defense, and then Udham Singh responded with a very spirited and eloquent defense of what he'd done, said what he'd done was entirely morally justified. So the judge then donned the black cap, as was customary when he pronounced the sentence of death, saying, Udham Singh, the sentence in this court is you shall be taken from here unto a lawful prison, wherein you shall be detained until the passage of 3 Sundays clear, and then hanged by the neck until you are dead, and may the Lord have mercy on your soul. At which point the judge brought down his gavel. The case was dismissed, and he was taken down. to await his sentence. He didn't appeal, which he could have done. He didn't ask for a stay of execution, which could have at least delayed his execution, allowed some sort of reprieve campaign to build. The Times newspaper, surprisingly, the newspaper of the British establishment, described him as a freedom fighter. Because of the civil disorder, growing unrest in India, one might have thought the British government would think it was wise not to kill him, especially as it was drawing even more attention to the Jallianwala Bagh massacre as some sort of compromise with the Congress party, which had not been banned at that point. But nevertheless, his execution was going to go ahead, and he met it with the greatest of equanimity and fortitude. As was customary, at 9 o'clock in the morning on the 31st of July, he was to meet his doom. So this was to allow him sufficient time, over 3 weeks after the sentencing, to settle his affairs, to write a few last letters, to write his will, visits from friends and kinsfolk, but there were none. There were no family here. Normally the condemned had family in this country, so they could be visited for a last time. And 9 o'clock in the morning, he was taken from the condemned cell to the hang house, which was just behind his cell. There was some door in the back of the cell. The prison officer said, "Oh, it was just a storeroom." So he didn't know to the last possible moment. And from entering that, the hang house to being dead was a matter of seconds. So it was Albert Pierpoint, the United Kingdom's most experienced public executioner, who gave him the long drop, which would have broken his neck instantly. So he was dead. And they would have left his body to hang for an hour, just in case there's any automatic muscular activity. But even if there was, he was either stone dead or he was in a one-way ratchet towards death. Even the finest hospital in the world couldn't have brought him back at that point because of the damage to the central nervous system, meaning there were no more automatic messages from his brain stem telling his heart and lungs to beat. Anyway, so then his body was given a perfunctory burial in the grounds of Pentonville Prison. That's part of the sentence, and buried within the prison walls. So who performed the obsequies? I presume an Anglican prison chaplain, though there were a few Sikhs in London at the time. I'm not sure if a Sikh clergyman was there to do that. He used to attend what was then called Shepherd's Bush Gurdwara here in London. I've done a video outside that, and I've also filmed outside Pentonville Prison. Unfortunately, I wasn't allowed in to film the former execution chamber. Obviously, the United Kingdom hasn't executed anyone since 1964. So years later, the government of India requested whether the mortal remains of Udham Singh could be returned. Now, immediately after burial, they will have poured quicklime liberally over his corpse, which causes almost instant decomposition, so long as the cadaver is dry, and he would have just been reduced to dust and loam, really. So they had to scoop some of that and return that. That's the best they can do for his mortal remains, so he could be inhumated with the greatest of honor in his homeland, India. So at the time of his execution, Nehru had denounced what Udham Singh had done, but by the 1960s, Prime Minister Nehru was singing the praises of Udham Singh, saying he kissed the noose that we might be free. So he's widely seen as Shaeed Azam, as in the Great Martyr in India, and indeed his memory has been honoured with a film this year. A district in Uttarakhand was given his name in 1995, and somewhere else in Punjab has been given his name as well. So that is Udham Singh, who was a believer in ecumenism in India, was against communalism, obviously certainly wanted independence, was a Marxist, and so forth. So this is the event that made his name. That's enough from me, so please subscribe to my channel. Thank you. Goodbye.